The man had simply helped an elderly person nearby, only to be publicly humiliated by security guards. When he tried to argue, several guards pulled out stun batons and taught him a lesson. At that moment, the arrogant guards had no idea that this man, who swallowed his anger and returned to the back of the line, would soon personally overturn their rules. Just the day before, George had been struggling with money problems. His wife worked 3 jobs, but they still couldn't afford to take their sick daughter to the hospital. He felt utterly useless. He couldn't even take care of his own family. Desperate, George saw a TV game show where contestants could win money by answering trivia questions. Just signing up earned you $100, and every correct answer doubled your winnings. You could quit anytime. It seemed like a lifeline made for people in his situation. So he showed up early to stand in line, which is how he ended up helping the elderly person and getting bullied. But signing up was only the beginning. The show's producers put them through a series of tests. The first was a physical and reaction test. Years of scraping by at the bottom had toughened George up, and he excelled in every category. His stand-up performance caught the eye of the network's boss, Vance, who bluntly invited George to participate in another reality show called The Hunt. He even gave George $1,000 up front, but George refused without a second thought. He knew exactly how brutal the hunt was. Contestants had to survive 30 days of extreme hide-and-seek while being hunted down. If you made it to day 30, you'd win a massive cash prize enough to change George's family's life forever. But no matter how tempting the reward, it was still a death game with no guarantee of return. Seeing George unmoved, Vance smiled and told him he didn't actually need to survive all 30 days. The rules awarded extra money for each day survived if he could just make it to 7 days. It would be enough to support his wife and child for the rest of their lives. That hit George right where it hurt. In the end, he signed the waiver with trembling hands. Before the show started, staff fitted him with a wristband that not only tracked time but also displayed daily prize updates. Then, amid roaring cheers, he was led onto the stage along with 2 other contestants. The host began reading the rules. First, each contestant would receive $1,000 in escape funds and a 12-hour head start before the hunters began their pursuit. Second, every day, contestants had to record a video and drop it into a drone mailbox before midnight. Third, the longer you wanted to survive, the farther you had to run and the better you had to hide. For all 30 days, you'd be hunted by 5 professional hunters, and the entire thing would be broadcast live 24/7. Worst of all, any member of the public who provided accurate information on the contestants' whereabouts could win $10 million. With the sound of the starting gun, the hunt officially began. To complete the challenge, George found a skilled forger who gave him a complete makeover: new hairstyle, colored contacts, a fake ID, and some escape gear. Using his new identity, he bought a train ticket to New York. The AI ticket agent didn't catch the forgery, but on the train, his fake beard fell off. After arriving in New York, he checked into a hotel. The front desk clerk assumed he'd just shaved, so they didn't ask questions, but his contestant information was plastered all over the city. To avoid being recognized, he quickly grabbed his room key and hid inside. With everything in place, he had 1 hour left before the official start. The game rules required contestants to record a daily video, but the content was unrestricted, so he filmed a taunting video to mess with the audience, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it into a street mailbox, completing his first task. After midnight, he received a notification that $5,000 had been deposited into his account, marking the start of day 2. George naively thought he could just hole up here for 30 days and coast to victory. But that very night, the hunters captured the forger who had helped him. After some brutal interrogation, they learned George's fake identity. The next morning, George saw on the show that one of the other contestants had been killed. The guy had 0 survival instincts and openly went shopping at a convenience store. A few bounty hunters tailed him and took him out with ease, claiming the reward. George suddenly realized he was in serious danger. He quickly packed his gear, paid the front desk for 3 more nights, then quietly escaped through the window. He made his way to Boston, spent $200 on a retired veteran's clothes, and rented the guy's rundown apartment. Across the street was a drone mailbox, but a few drunks were hanging around it. To avoid being recognized, he decided to shower first before dropping off today's video. But when he grabbed his room key and headed to the communal bathroom, he noticed one of the drunks staring at his window. At first, George didn't think much of it, but as he stepped into the hallway, it suddenly hit him he'd seen that guy at the TV station. The man was one of the 5 hunters. His cover was blown. When he glanced out the window from another angle, he saw the 3 drunks meeting up with their leader, Connor. George wanted to hide in the communal bathroom, but it was too late. One of the hunters was already coming upstairs. To escape the hunters, he had no choice but to hide in the women's bathroom. He tried to climb out the window, only to find it had been welded shut. He'd had a chance to run, but he needed to go back to his room and grab his escape pack. So he ripped a towel rack off the wall, smashed a mirror, taped a shard to the end of the rod, and stuck it out the door to check for movement. Seeing the hunters waiting right outside, he bolted up the stairs, shouting to draw their attention. He made it to the roof just as a convoy of armored vehicles rolled in with reinforcements. With no other option, he climbed onto a neon sign, lowered a coil of rope down the side of the building, tested the weight, and slid down without hesitation. When he reached a window, he wrapped a towel around his fist and punched through the glass. The sound of shattering glass caught the hunter's attention. George had to race against the clock. He rushed back to his room, threw on his clothes, stuffed all his supplies into his backpack, but by then, the hunters and smart cameras were already in position. The showdown was about to begin. His every move was being tracked by drones, following him wherever he went, dodging a hail of bullets. He sprinted down a long hallway and slid into an elevator under maintenance. From there, he made his way into a pitch-black basement. He tried to light some debris to see, but accidentally started a fire. With the hunters about to break through the door, he scrambled to find another way out. Luckily, the fire drove all the rats out of the basement. The rats scurried into the sewer to escape, and George had a flash of inspiration. He pried open a manhole cover and disappeared into the sewers. When he emerged in a back alley, he ran into two black brothers who helped him hide at their place. It turned out the younger brother was a blogger who had downloaded every episode of The Hunt since it started airing, determined to expose how the show operated and uncover its dirty secrets. According to the blogger's analysis, no contestant in this death game had ever survived to day 30. But if a contestant's popularity was high enough, the producers would intentionally let them keep running. George's performance had driven the Hunt's ratings to an all-time high, and the network was definitely going to milk every last drop of value out of him. Next, George found his way to the home of the blogger's friend, Elton, a tech geek. Elton knew the producers would likely deploy DNA sniffers to track contestants. These devices were installed on every streetlight, and once activated, there'd be nowhere to hide. The only way to escape was to go underground. Elton was helping George because his father had been a cop. When the government privatized local law enforcement, big corporations like the TV network got their own armed forces. Elton's father, an honest cop, refused to play along and resigned in protest, only to be killed by former colleagues who had joined the private sector. Elton inherited his father's sense of justice and vowed to fight the system. Before his father was murdered, he'd found a Cold War-era bunker in a nearby forest. If George could hide there for 2 weeks, he'd complete the challenge. As for the daily video submissions, he could record them in advance, and Elton would drop them off for him. Elton had only one condition: if George won, he had to publish an exposé on the network's crimes. George's voice carried more weight than any past contestant. People wanted him to win. He had become a symbol of hope for the underclass. They thought the plan was foolproof. But one day, George was spotted by Elton's mother, who suffered from dementia. The old woman hit the panic button. 2 minutes later, a fully armed National Guard unit surrounded the house. Elton was well prepared when they were surrounded by a large number of guards. He activated a mechanism releasing electric current and pulled out a water gun. Ready for action. The guards stormed the house, splitting into 2 teams to search. Elton deliberately shouted to lure them in. When one group stepped into the electrified zone, he squeezed the trigger, spraying water to conduct the current. A few of the officers didn't even realize what was happening before they were electrocuted and collapsed to the ground. After dealing with the enemies in front, Elton opened a pre-dug underground tunnel. But just as they were about to escape, a hunter lying in wait ambushed and stabbed him. George pulled out a handgun confiscated from the guards and aimed at the hunter but didn't kill him, helping Elton up to flee. The hunter then took a call from Vance, the TV network boss. However, the call was actually for George. Just as the black guy had analyzed, the show producers were planning to let George keep running to boost ratings. Moreover, Vance wanted George to kill the hunter on camera to spark the audience's excitement. But George refused, shooting the camera instead. Then the two fled the farm in an off-road vehicle, but the hunters deployed a helicopter that shadowed them. Elton told George to let him go and hold off the enemies, buying George a chance for survival and offering hope for the oppressed. But George, not ungrateful, took Elton with him and raced off. Yet not far away, ruthless bullets struck Elton down. That shot ignited George's fury. What had started as a desire to survive and reunite with his family turned into a fight for all the oppressed. Facing blockers from both front and rear, he turned the vehicle sharply, floored the accelerator, and charged at the enemies. Just before impact, George leapt out and plunged into the river. On day 17 of the chase, the game was reaching a critical stage. Hunters expanded their search, leaving George with barely any place to hide. The map showed that passing through a village ahead would lead to a safe haven, but the road was destined to be rugged and winding. In a short span of days, George's life had seen dramatic turnarounds, from a desperate father trying to earn money for baby formula to a symbol of resistance for the oppressed class. His video content was no longer just about completing tasks. It had become a war declaration against the TV network. Meanwhile, the producers activated DNA sniffers and soon located him on the highway. He rushed into the middle of the road, flagged down a car, and took the female driver hostage, forcing her to help him escape. After learning the truth about the network's corruption, the woman decided to help the lone challenger fighting for love. Along the way, poor people held banners and cheered him on, encouraging him to go all the way. When the hunters set up a roadblock, George began negotiating with Connor. He lied that he was strapped with explosives and vowed mutual destruction if not allowed through. He also demanded a fully fueled plane and crew. After saying this, he tossed the megaphone aside, leaving no room for bargaining. Soon, Connor received orders from Boss Vance to allow passage, but George knew the producers would never let him win. His plan was to fly into Canadian airspace and parachute to freedom. But just minutes after takeoff, Vance's voice came over the radio. He'd known all along George was bluffing. The plane had a stealth scanner that confirmed George wasn't carrying any explosives. The reason he let George board was because Vance had an even crazier plan. He wanted to sign George and turn him from contestant to hunter, paying him $5 million per season on one condition: he had to kill the current hunters live on air. George was confused. Who would ever support a man who killed national heroes? but Vance had already thought of everything, including the perfect motive. How about avenging your wife and daughter? Then Vance played him several recordings. It turned out the person George had blown up on the bridge was one of the hunters, and the remaining hunters had killed George's wife and daughter in retaliation. Vance's plan was to release the footage and destroy the hunters' reputation. George would take them out and step into their place a clean swap. If he refused, Vance would order the hunters to kill him. On the surface, everything seemed calm. George smashed the computer in fury, but he appeared to have no other choice. When the hunter disguised as a crew member attacked, George grabbed the weapon the production team had hidden and took out 3 hunters. The plane was now out of control. George gave the last parachute to the female driver. Then he went to the cockpit to deliver his final words, exposing the show's corruption and calling on people to shut the network down. His speech was powerful and heartfelt, but nobody heard it, because Vance had cut in with a commercial. He wanted George to play his part, or else he'd air an AI-generated fake video. George refused to back down. He answered Vance's threat with his middle finger. When the ad ended, the network aired the fake video, sending the audience into an uproar. Then a surface-to-air missile struck, and the plane was blown to pieces. But that wasn't the end. The black blogger cracked the video and exposed the show's secrets. What the audience had been watching was only what the network wanted them to see. The real ending came when a girl found the black box and restored the audio of George and Vance's conversation, finally revealing the truth to the entire nation. Even the footage of the hunters killing George's wife and daughter was fake, designed solely to fuel George's rage and get him to eliminate the existing hunters. Now, the only question on everyone's mind was whether George was still alive. But no one knew. As the scandal exploded, Vance became public enemy number 1. Furious viewers hurled firebombs at the network and burned it to the ground. Amid the flames, a masked man walked onto the stage holding a gun. When he ripped off the mask, Vance froze. George had returned as an avenging angel, rewriting this twisted chapter of history and building a new order from the ashes.